What's up, everyone, and welcome back to HateWatchers. Today we're wrapping up our weekly coverage of Andor with the final 3 episodes, episodes 10, 11, and 12, titled A Leader Must Lead, Who Else Knows, and Jedha Kyber Erso, respectively. Let's get right into the breakdown. Spoilers ahead. We begin episode 10 with Luthen touching up his Mrs. Doubtfire wig, as he has a date with his man inside the ISB, Lonnie, who tells him that he heard from a friend of a friend whose roommate's cat told him that the Empire's nuclear program is actually just a front for their weapons program. No shit. Luthen tells Lonnie he did good and he can come with him to Yavin, and Lonnie gets so excited he dies. Luthen then meets with Kleya, and they can feel the walls closing in around them, and the day they feared has arrived. And as Luthen destroys their radio, Dedra shows up to his shop, trying to sell him the radio from her 92 Miata. But they drop all pretense, and Dedra revels in finally finding the rebel spy. But when she turns to investigate possible marijuana smoke in the back of the premises, Luthen has an oopsie with this dagger and is bleeding out, so he's rushed into a space ambulance to keep him alive for interrogation. The ISB is flustered as shit, and they're in a downright tizzy, and the Imperial CSI team goes through Luthen's shop and ship. Kleya, shaken by all this, has flashbacks of her youth when Luthen went AWOL from his military detachment that was killing her people. Luthen then takes her under his wing, and together they begin their work against the nascent Empire. After this warm, cozy trip down memory lane, she becomes a Muslim, and totally unrelated, shortly after her conversion there are some car bombings outside the hospital where Luthen is being held. Meanwhile, Dedra is placed under arrest and storms off to sort this out, leaving an opening for Kleya to disguise herself as a nurse, provide medical care to ET, and blast her way to Luthen. Here, she sadly does what's expected of her and sends Luthen off to the great beyond, and Kleya then makes her escape. In episode 11, Krennic comes into town just to assault Dedra a bit and interrogate her on why she had some information on the construction of the Death Star, and who else might have gained access to it, like Luthen perhaps. Then he assaults her again on his way out the door. The ISB has recovered security footage of Kleya, and while she's holed up on the south side, she thinks this is as good a time as any to learn how to operate a ham radio, which she uses to beep out a message to Yavin. The ISB launches a woman hunt for Kleya, and Andor, K2SO, and the walking Rogue One cameo Melshi arrive on Coruscant, just before the ISB intercepts her transmission and tracks her down, blocking all comms in the sector. The Imperial SWAT team approaches the apartment, wisely foregoing their helmets, but K2SO starts carving a path through the Imperials to get to Andor. In episode 12, Melshi goes out for some ciggies and runs into the ISB, but he's able to outsmart them by running back where he came from, a development the ISB team was not prepared for. The three get flashbanged in the apartment, but apparently Melshi is immune and he fires back, but really it's K2SO who does all the heavy lifting, as he gets his own vaunted hallway scene, like Vader, Luke, and Darth Maul before him. They leave Coruscant bound for Yavin, where Mon Mothma is getting bitched out by Saw Gerrera, and they hear that Andor and crew are coming in hot, so they give them a cold reception. Then Andor gets chewed out for taking the risks he did with this extraction mission, but he makes up for it by passing on information about the Empire's superweapon. Then it just devolves into them bickering about how important Luthen was to the cause, which felt less like a real in-universe discussion and more like a discussion Star Wars fans would have. Then Andor tells Will that Luthen's dead and they commiserate, and then he tells Vel that he's dead and they drink and commiserate. Meanwhile, the ISB chief Partagaz is listening to some rebel propaganda when the Empire comes to arrest him, but he asks for a moment, which he uses to see what a blaster bolt tastes like. Back on Yavin, Vel tells Andor to reconnect with Bix, despite the fact that even being able to do that kinda defeats the purpose of how and why she left, but whatever. And then Vel finds Kleya wandering around in the rain, and drags her back to her hut so they can commiserate. Andor is then tasked with meeting the contact he meets at the beginning of Rogue One, an urgent mission, so urgent that Andor takes some time to water his plants and then walk in slow motion. While he walks in slow motion, we see a final montage of some of the characters, including this random shot of Mon Mothma's ex-husband whoring around, Dedra in an Imperial prison, Saw Gerrera on Jedha, Director Krennic looking out over the Death Star, and finally we see Andor blast off toward the events of Rogue One. And lastly, over on Space Kansas, we see that Bix has gleefully returned to the site of her traumatic assault, and she has a kid from God knows who, and the shot sticks on her for about 45 seconds, as the episode, and the season, and the series and my fucking patience with this character come to an end. Well, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide if these episodes were great watches or hate watches. And these episodes were all solid, so they go down as great watches. This arc was all about wrapping up everyone's story and weaving together the connective tissue between this series and the events of Rogue One. And you could definitely feel that this show emptied the chambers with episodes 8 and 9, and these final episodes didn't live up to anywhere near that same level. Episodes 10, 11, and 12 definitely have some minor issues, but still, these were good episodes for the most part. I liked Clea's flashbacks to her and Luthen's pasts. I would have preferred it was built up slower, maybe sprinkling these flashbacks throughout the course of the season, instead of introducing it at the 11th hour to make us care more about the events that were unfolding, which often feels as hollow as it sounds. But nonetheless, I thought the events of those flashbacks fleshed out their relationship well, and the lessons she learned were well correlated with everything she had to do in making sure Luthen wasn't interrogated by the Empire. And it brought about a very good emotional dump when she pulled the cord. Now, Luthen was one of my favorite characters in this show, but I didn't feel like he was a major part of this season, at least not directly. His fingerprints were all over everything a handful of characters were doing, but I would have liked to see more of him. He was always a mysterious, forceful character, so I think we all would have benefited from spending more time with him. And as such, I didn't feel quite as much from his death as the show wanted me to feel, especially when the episode had an 18-second fade to black to memorialize his death. Then there was quite a bit of time spent in the rest of the episodes after his death, emphasizing how important he was. And it felt more like the show was trying to ingrain that belief in us, like they were trying to make up for not having him be as big of a focus this season. We all knew the character wasn't going to make it out of this alive, but I think I expected to feel more from his death. Now, I did like seeing a more vicious, angry director Krennic. It was very different from the confident, collected Krennic we saw earlier this season, and this new form brings the character more in line with his Rogue One depiction, which is a nice touch. And just overall, the way this show leads into Rogue One, while entirely expected, was handled well, especially when you remember that Rogue One itself leads directly into A New Hope. So watching the second half of this season, then Rogue One, then A New Hope, should be a pretty nice viewing experience. Lastly, K2SO was a great addition to these episodes. He was a breath of fresh air and he brought some levity that I think the show benefited from. But yeah, these were good episodes and a solid end to the series. Now, the night these episodes aired and the following day, I was already seeing people calling this final arc a masterpiece and calling the show a masterpiece. And call me old-fashioned, but I don't think that word should be thrown around so lightly. I think Andor is a good show. It's often great, but I also think some people need to get a hold of themselves. But that's more of a discussion for the complete season review, so keep an eye out for that. What did you think about this final arc? Do you appreciate everything this series did to funnel all of its storylines directly into the events of Rogue One? Anything about this final arc that you didn't like? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of current shows and movies. Thank you for taking time to water the plants under the shadow of the Death Star with us today, and I'll catch you on the next one.